Welcome to the Intrinsic Report, where we leave you informed and inspired. In the last episode, we saw how empires rise and fall in repeating civilizational cycles shaped by economics, war, and innovation. We explored America's current decline and China's potential rise as the next global superpower. We now embark on a quest of understanding the Chinese civilization. And in order to do this, we must travel way back to a time I call the dawn of the Middle Kingdom. Modern China traces its origins to a period somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Settlements were scattered along the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers in northern China. The early Chinese banded in clans or tribes for survival. At first, they roamed the nearby mountains for their subsistence before learning how to cultivate the river valley. And gradually, as resources became scarce, numerous conflicts arose, resulting in major wars that drew and redrew tribal territories. Banpo village is an example of an early tribal settlement with an iconic circular village layout with houses built around a central plaza. Its design suggesting an egalitarian matrilineal social organization, which was quite common during the Yang Shao period. But this model would give in to a more stratified social order in the Longshan period as specialization and trade emerged. At the peak of early urbanization, the early two culture emerged and they had perfected construction, bronze metallurgy, labor management, and standardization. The first Chinese dynasty proper, the Xia, emerged in the 3rd millennium BC. They rose out of the early two culture, who were at the latter stages of decline. As I mentioned earlier, the early two are the earliest known bronze casting civilization in East Asia. Their artifacts indicate a high level of craftsmanship and technological advancements, and they engaged in trade far and wide, returning with jade and precious stones. Now, while the reasons for their decline remain unclear, they laid the groundwork for urbanization, state formation, and the development of future Chinese civilizations. The Xia, like other Chinese tribes, had settled in the middle of the Yellow River Valley for more than just the water. The basin was geographically isolated by the Gobi Desert to the north, plateaus as well as mountains to the west, and the Pacific Sea to the east and south. Nestled between these grand natural barriers, a worldview developed that this was all there was under heaven. The sun, moon, and constellations revolved around this enclosed real estate, which they often called the Middle Kingdom. The geography of the river valley provided natural defenses against potential invasions. The rivers equally allowed the movement of people and goods on dugout canoes made of hollowed logs. More than just safety and transportation, the alluvial soil along the river basin supported the cultivation of staple foods like millet, wheat, and rice. There was one problem, though, with this paradise: catastrophic perennial floods. Living directly under the mercy of heaven, the early Chinese were sensitive to natural disasters, often attributing them to divine displeasure, which ultimately influenced how they approach flood management. Since the floods were believed to be a result of moral failing, the only way to restore harmony between heaven and the Middle Kingdom was by appeasement. Shamans were entrusted to mediate between the people and the spiritual world. Practical engineering solutions were therefore overlooked in favor of ritualistic remedies. It wasn't until 2100 BC, when all efforts to stop the Great Flood had failed, that a man named Yu of the Xia tribe broke with convention and applied engineering to the problem. It was a high-risk and high-reward task, since Yu's father had tried and failed so disastrously that he was imprisoned and the king forced to step down. After 13 years of mobilizing, organizing labor, dredging, and construction, Yu was successful. This monumental achievement unlocked food security, opened up the possibility of trade, and enabled the establishment of stable communities in the river valley. Great as it was magnified by the perception that a mortal man had dared and triumphed in taming the gods. The early Chinese tribes were guided by meritocracy in their appointments to public service. They had a system of abdication where the right of rule passed on to the most qualified among them. Whoever that man was, he and his clan would reign over the others. In a significant act of humility and foresight, then King Shun decided to abdicate the throne and pass the leadership to Yu. So the man who had defied the gods and mastered their floods would go on to earn himself a place in Chinese mythology. He ascended to the high honor of legendary rulers and deities known as the Three Sovereigns and Five Emperors. To posterity, he would be remembered as Yu the Great. His reign marked the beginning of the Xia Dynasty and the first of many civilizational cycles in Chinese history. Yu's notable failure was in establishing a hereditary monarchy, a significant break from the tribal meritocracy that had awarded him the throne. Following the hereditary system, 16 descendants of Yu succeeded him after his death over the course of the next 400 years. Among them were a few good emperors like Shao Kahn and Hui, who left behind a proud legacy for their efforts in restoring order, promoting agriculture, strengthening governance, and fostering cultural integration, which helped lay the foundation for the growth and stability of early Chinese civilizations. Shao Kahn's predecessor at the time had been a tyrant, and therefore his leadership helped to re-establish the moral legitimacy of the Xia dynasty. To strengthen the central government and improve administrative efficiency, he appointed capable officials and promoted merit-based governance. He worked to unify various tribes and communities under his rule, fostering a sense of shared identity and cultural cohesion among the people. Hui, on the other hand, encouraged the cultivation of new crops and the use of improved farming techniques, which contributed to economic prosperity. He focused on building infrastructure, including roads and irrigation systems, which facilitated trade and communication between different regions. He implemented legal reforms that helped to establish a legal framework that governed the behavior of individuals and maintained social order. However, the majority of the Shia emperors became decadent and corrupt. Several successors even failed to respond to natural disasters and social unrest, eroding their moral legitimacy. The Xia Dynasty ended under the reign of Jie, a very notorious tyrannical emperor who became the archetype of despotic rule in Chinese moral political philosophy. After he succeeded to the throne, he lived an extravagant life, day and night, without any thought for his country or his people. In addition, he killed the patriotic ministers who challenged him with good advice. All of his actions enraged the people so much that at last they revolted, led by Tang of Shang, who defeated King Jie's forces at the Battle of Mingtiao in 1600 BC. Jie was then banished to a desolate mountain where he passed away. Some of the Xia's people surrendered and were allowed to remain in the Middle Kingdom. They were even rewarded with noble titles and placed in charge of offering sacrificial ceremonies to their ancestors, a courtesy extended in honor of their forebear, Yu the Great. The rest, who refused to surrender, were separated into two groups. One went to the south, while the other migrated northward, and are believed to be the ancestors of the nomadic Xiongnu, setting the stage for future hostilities and invasions from the north. The end of the Shia's 470-year-long cycle did not bring about the fall of the Chinese civilization. Rather, it marked the beginning of a new cycle, one where, if history's lessons were heeded, there's a chance to reverse the Shia's rigid monarchical structure in favor of an earlier meritocratic form of governance. That will be all for now. Do let me know whether you were informed or inspired down in the comments below. Subscribe to be notified when the next episode in this series is released, titled The Age of the Warrior Priests. I've been your host, Martin K, for the Intrinsic Report. Have a good one.